making sourdough since, I don't know, how many months has it been since quarantine? 4 months? 5 months? Yeah, that's how long I've been making sourdough. Never had the desire to do it before, thought it was too much work, and it is, but now that I work 5 feet away from my kitchen, I'm making sourdough every week, and I've learned quite a bit as a sourdough newbie, so these are kind of my tips and tricks of making a sourdough, like a no-knead basic sourdough. You gotta start with really active yeast or starter. I feed my starter before I even start this whole process, wait 3 hours for it to double, and then I make this levain. This levain is literally just the starter, a little bit of flour, a little bit of water, and let that rise for 12 hours. And then we come back to it and make the dough. So in the dough, you have to be precise with the measurements. That's the one thing I learned. I started off just doing like cup measurements, and it works. My dough turned out great. My bread turned out lovely, but you don't get consistently similar results when you measure things than if you weigh them. So I invested in the scale, and now I'm actually weighing everything, including my water. The other secret here is to add a little bit of milk. Like a little splash of milk in your dough makes all the difference. It gives it kind of that creamy, addictive flavor. I don't know what it is. And I'm just, for good measure, throwing in some jalapenos and cheddar because, you know, why not? A little bit of spice in your bread. It really does taste amazing, and while this stuff is rising in the kitchen smells amazing too. It's so good. And that's it. You just now let it rest. The other secret here is don't add salt at the very beginning. So I'm adding salt in about 30 minutes later in a little bit of water, like a salt water slurry. And that helps a lot because the yeast or the bacteria in the yeast they don't like the salt, so it'll slow them down. So if you don't put the salt in for a while, it'll help that first rise get nice and big, and then the salt will slow them down a bit. And now with just a matter of kneading and waiting and kneading and waiting. I normally just start this in the morning, and every hour I'll walk up to it, give it a little knead. Make sure you're gentle here. You don't want to deflate any of those bubbles that are forming. And just kind of let it go. I wet my hands a little bit so that it doesn't stick to my hands too much. But yeah, that's about it. About 3 of these knead and waits. It's like nighttime by the time I'm done here. Look at this. And then it's got to go in for a nice long rise in the fridge. That's normally about 12, maybe 18 hours for me. And that's where you get that nice sourdough flavor coming in. Yeah, you want that nice long rise. I mean, I could bake it just like this, but then it's not really sourdough. It's just bread. So off we go into the fridge, and let's go to sleep. And here it is first thing in the morning, looking good. I let it rest for about 15 minutes to come to room temperature before I start playing with it, because it is a bit cold. And then we're just going to half the dough, because this is a lot. And we're going to make 2 loaves out of this. So I like this part, it's the fun part to me. But I'm basically going to tuck everything in, kind of like a baby. Get it nice and cozy in there. Kind of like envelope style, I guess. Is that what you call this? Anyways, this is what I do. I just tuck it in and then flip it over, and then we're going to gently start to kind of push it towards you for one side, and you'll see it kind of keeps that nice round shape. You don't want too much flour on the surface. I think I actually have too much flour there, so I kind of will brush it off, but you want a little bit of tension, so you want it to stick to the board a little bit, or the counter. But if you're finding it's too sticky, then obviously use a little bit of flour, but you really shouldn't. Like, the dough should be pretty good. And there you go. You've got to be gentle, make sure we don't deflate anything, but I'm going to let this rest now for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to come back to the final rise. So here I'm just going to give it a final little shape, make sure they're nice and rounded. And then we're going to let it sit in these little bread poofing bowls. I happen to have one of these fancy ones, a Benetton, but you don't really need one. You just need a bowl lined with a kitchen towel, sprinkle with loads and loads of flour. I'm using rice flour and cornmeal because I just feel like it. And then you got to put it upside down and just let it rest. Did the same thing with the other loaf. And this one, because I don't have 2 bannetons, I just have 1 banneton, I just use a bowl with a kitchen towel. It works just as fine. You don't get that fancy, those lines that people get when they use a banneton, but you don't need it. You just need a bowl. It's fine. Does the job. That's it. We'll just let it rest. And here we are, a couple of hours later. Now with preheating my oven, make sure you preheat your oven way before with your Dutch oven that's going to be cooking in it, because you need it nice and hot to get that golden crust. And then I just happen to have a fancy lame. I was just using a knife before this. And I'm hoping that this will help me get a really pretty ear on top of my loaf. We'll see. But again, just a little score to help it rise. And that's it. So here we go, plop it in. I like using that parchment paper because it helps play with the dough and then you don't have to burn yourself touching a pan. So I cooked it 15 minutes without the lid, 15 minutes with the lid. The only way to check if it's done is to check the internal temperatures at 205, which it is. And that's it. Make sure you let it cool before you cut into it. Enjoy. Bon appetit.